Hi, hello everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, and welcome to the third keynote lecture of our Public Space Academy. And this is Luisa Bravo, the director of the Public Space Academy. As you know, we are having these monthly conversations with leading scholars, practitioners, activists, artists, and public space lovers. We are also running, as you know, the online program of the Academy on our Open edX platform that you can reach from our website, publicspaceacademy.org. I'm here today with Egle, a team member of the Public Space Academy. Hello, Egle.
Hello, Luisa. Welcome to all public space lovers. We hope you'll enjoy this lecture and we'll have great takeaways. Please ask questions on the chat. We will go through them at the end of this lecture.
Thank you, Egle. So now we move to the keynote lecture that we have invited to be with us today. I'm very happy to welcome Floor van Ditzhuyzen. Sorry, my pronunciation of a Dutch name is probably wrong, but Floor is an architect, researcher, curator, and tutor based in Rotterdam. Educated as an architect and urban designer at TU Delft and the Universitat Polytècnica de Catalunya. She's a founding partner of the interdisciplinary designstudio, the Ontwerpwerkplaats, and has won awards with projects like the Pop-Up Bus Stop. Floor is the co-founder of the international We Love Public Space Festival and has been a tutor at the Rotterdam Academy of Art and the Rotterdam Academy of Architecture and Urban Design. Currently, she teaches at the TU Delft, and in 2020, she founded the Public Space Detective blog, an ongoing research project investigating common and uncommon phenomena in public space. So, welcome on stage, Floor.
Well, thank you, Luisa. Nice to be here.
Yes, it's nice to have you here, especially because we have been into previous collaborations and joint activities. I would like to mention that Floor is also editor and columnist of our web magazine, Mastering Public Space. And so I'm glad to have you with us today, and I think I can give you the floor.
Well, thank you, Luisa. Thank you for inviting me for this keynote lecture. And welcome to all spectators. You see an image which is quite important to me. It was an image during one of the editions of our festival that we staged, the We Love Public Space Festival, as Luisa mentioned. I'm one of the co-founders, and it's a free, relatively small-scale event once a year in Rotterdam. It's a platform for exchange of experiences and knowledge between public space professionals and lovers. And that can be artists, designers, architects, but also people who work for municipalities, etc. And maybe we'll have a next edition, and you could come to Rotterdam to attend our festival. I'll move on now to my lecture. And this is what my main question for the day is, highlighted above, urban hospitality. What does it entail? For whom? And why does it matter? And just a small overview of the content. What makes a city inclusive? different hostile architecture strategies, countering hostile architecture. And then we move on to urban hospitality. We extend the notion of urban hospitality for the other than human, nature, animals, and nature. And I will discuss two cases in the Netherlands, which are quite interesting from this point of view. And we'll end with, of course, conclusion and recommendations. Well, back to me. As Louisa mentioned, I am also known as the public space detective. And I started the blog in March 2020 when, well, all of the world was in lockdown. And I went to walk in the city every day, an hour, to walk my inner dog, so to say. And the scenes I encountered on the street during these walks were so well, extraordinary that I started documenting them, photographing them. And well, this was at a certain point also the trigger to start thinking about what is going on here, what is happening. And well, if you talk about common and uncommon phenomena, Corona was definitely an uncommon phenomenon in public space. So that's the starting point of the blog, of the project. This is me in action. And well, you can look it up, the blog, but I also at a certain point had stickers made because I thought, well, I just don't want to be only visible online. I think I should also be more visible actively in public space. So I turned into an activist at a rather late age, you could say, rather old age, but here I am. And when I encounter objects or scenes or situations in public space, I have my stickers with me and apply them. For instance, on objects that I think are hostile. To move on to the subject of urban hospitality, we start with thinking about inclusive cities. What exactly makes a city open and inclusive and hospitable, so to say? And well, here you see a quote from a vision document from the municipality of Rotterdam, in which they express what it is to them: welcoming and socially accessible public spaces where everyone feels welcome and safe, regardless of income, disability, gender, culture, or age. When you think about this, this means urban hospitality for all: residents, visitors, rich or poor, old or young, native or non-native residents, have or have nots, heterosexual or LGBTQ people, and maybe also human and other than human. So this is quite extensive if you want to be hospitable as a city for all users. Is this feasible? I'll stick to Rotterdam as a case, as a casus, because, well, it's my stamping ground and I know the city well. And this on your, do I see a mouse? Do you see a mouse? Probably not. You see the front of you see an image from the marketing campaign for Rotterdam, Rotterdam Make It Happen. And well, Rotterdam is a very multicultural city. As a harbor city, it houses more than 170 nationalities. And well, the campaign flirts with this idea, uses this image of being a multicultural city for Rotterdam as being an inclusive city, so to say. On the right-hand side, you see the front of the policy that was made public in 2014 to make the inner city of Rotterdam more hospitable, more attractive, because, well, it was there was quite some work to be done there. So this was really necessary to do that. But the title of this policy, called City Lounge, implies, well, the word lounge implies consuming. It implies shopping, drinking cocktails, consuming, in short. And it maybe also implies that the inner city is mostly hospitable towards the haves in our city, the people with money to spend. And this is another image from this campaign on your left-hand side, Rotterdam Make It Happen, in which, publicity for also a new building in Rotterdam called the Depot building, a large publicly accessible warehouse of the Museum of Modern Art. And, you could say, to me, this is an hypocrite image, because a hip skater girl is used to frame Rotterdam as a hip city. And this was a favorite skatepot for the skate community, with a very vibrant social life. But when the building was finished and the surroundings were also transformed and greened, the ledges on which you could sit were fitted with pig's ears. And pig's ears are, maybe you know, they are meant to deter skaters from grinding on these ledges. And it's a clear message to the skate community: you're not wanted here. And to me, this is I have my doubts about this. So back to the subject of urban hospitality. It is affected by, for instance, surveillance technology, not specifically for Rotterdam, but for a lot of cities. And of course, safety surveillance is meant for safety, but also for commercial reasons. And in my opinion, it undermines the sense of welcome in public space. On your left-hand side, you see a poster, and it says, "You are being watched, followed, and scanned, and this has to stop." So there is a community in the Netherlands which is opposing to this, and I think they have a point. On the right-hand side, you see a publication, the front of a publication, which, it's like a typology of all different kinds of cameras in public space and what they do. But the real issue, of course, when it comes to public space, we need to talk about hostile architecture. And, it's also known in other terms: defensive urbanism and unpleasant design, hostile design, defensive design. Just for a definition, the definition I use, hostile architecture comprises visible and invisible interventions in public spaces aimed to deter, discourage, or limit undesirable behavior, with the ultimate goal to render homeless people and other unwanted groups invisible by driving them out of the public domain. Because in general, what you don't see is what is invisible in the city does not exist. That's the general psychology of behind the strategies. Hostel architecture is quite a hot topic lately, and I have a theory about that because I think that's caused by the corona pandemic we experienced. Because during lockdowns, the general public has experienced what it means to be restricted in their use, in the free use of public space. And that's something that, for instance, homeless people experience every day. And I think that's the reason why there is a lot of publicity and also more serious research into public space. Callous Objects is a philosophical exploration of the subject. The book, these are book fronts. Michael Labbe also is a philosopher. And Smooth City by Dutch researcher René Boer. And they are all critical towards hostel architecture. And even some authors think it should be forbidden. Well, if you think about hostel architecture, the bench, the public bench, is of course a very, very prominent example. This is a cartoon for the New Yorker by John Adams. And I don't need to explain it. It says quite a lot about the aim of hostel architecture or defensive urbanism. And this is the concept of hospitality translated to public space. And why do I choose this image? Because to me, the public bench is really symbolic for urban hospitality. It's the feature, the public amenity in public space that invites you to take a seat, have a chat, maybe have a spontaneous meeting with somebody. And that's why it's so, that's why it's so cynical that sometimes situations like this occur, that certain groups are not allowed to use the bench as they maybe need to use it. I distinguish in context two different types of context: ad hoc strategies, interventions that are applied when a problem is manifest. For example, rough sleeping in urban niches. These are two examples. Apparently there was a problem here, and the spaces were retrofitted, so to say, with measures preventing rough sleeping. This is also about rough sleeping. This is the Museum Park in Rotterdam. On the left-hand side, the situation where, they tried to do something about it, but you could still lie down there and sleep there. And on the right-hand side, they tried to solve the problem with a decorative solution, so to say, by putting nice decorative rocks underneath this bridge. And this is another example from the center of Rotterdam, which is a bench smack in the middle of the center, and which is retrofitted with these dividers that were made to measure, and that prevents people from lying down to rest, for example, or to sleep, whatever. Then you have an invisible strategy, which is quite invasive. You could discuss whether this is architecture, but it is physical. So it's a mosquito device, which is a device that emits a high frequency sound deemed to be only heard by adolescents. I've heard from friends, older friends, that they could also hear it, but it's a very annoying sound, and it's aimed at at deterring youth hanging out in certain spots. Very invasive, very physical. The only thing you can do to avoid it is to remove yourself from this specific spot. Then I have the category a priori strategies. Strategies which are applied before there even is a problem present. And it is connected to hostel architecture as a design discipline. And that discipline emerged in the 90s, parallel with gentrification of cities as a deliberate transformation strategy. And I think this is quite a nice image on hostel architecture as a design discipline. And it goes often hand in hand with gentrification. And the thing is, this is a very famous example, the Camden bench. The thing is, this looks like a rather nice object, but it's hostile architecture in disguise, and the hostility is incorporated within the design itself. It's not retrofitted. The bench is not retrofitted, but it is not adapted, but it is incorporated in the design itself. The uneven surface makes it impossible to lie down or to rest. It's very sturdy, so you cannot skate or grind on it, for example. And it's indented on the lower side. I heard that's because they wanted to prevent drug dealers hiding their stash underneath a bench. Rotterdam also has a priori hostile architecture designs. This is the street furniture especially designed for Rotterdam, called Rotterdamse stijl, which has often has armrests in the middle of the bench, which also makes it impossible to lie down. This person posed for me, but you can see this is quite uncomfortable. And when you ask the designers and the landscape architects about this specific furniture, they say, well, we added the armrests for elderly people to help them get up and sit down. But at the same time, you could say what is hospitable for one group, the elderly, is hostile to another, homeless people. And last but not least, we have a situation occurring in Amsterdam this year, where one of the canals is being transformed into a space where the car is a guest. It's you can get there by car, but only to drive through. They took out the parking places, etc. And on the left-hand side, you see the proposal. And nowadays, you have to go into participation processes with local residents, and the local residents mentioned that they did not want public benches because they were afraid of people hanging out there causing nuisance for them. And the result you see on the right-hand side, the executed scheme without trees, but the trees will still be planted later because it was not the good season to plant trees. But the benches have disappeared, and they will not be. There will not be public benches on the canals, which is quite a pity. The canal is really iconic for Amsterdam, and it's a pity that you cannot sit and maybe enjoy the view and, well, sit at the canal. And I call this public space paranoia because it's really, people are already upfront speculating about the possible future use of public space, and instead of waiting what happens, and maybe this problem will not occur. You never know. To conclude this piece of my lecture, just a small summarization. If cities want to truly be inclusive and hospitable to all, they should abandon hostile architecture, because it's simply a relief of symptoms, since it fails to address the true problems, such as the lack of shelter for homeless people. And even moreover, it undermines the sense of welcome in public spaces for others, not only those groups targeted, but for all urbanites. And you could say that living in the city has its pros and its cons. If you live in the city, it goes with sharing space with others. It's really vital to living in the city, and this can sometimes cause friction. In general, people tend to avoid friction, but it's important to keep relating to each other and negotiating the use of public space, and also the use of public amenities, such as public benches, is crucial in this. Together, I already mentioned the growing attention for hostile architecture, and there are also artists and designers that are opposing hostile architecture with interventions, and I will show a few. This is a poster from the Guerrilla Girls, a female art collective, and they question the status of homeless persons, because they even have less rights than prisoners of war. And this is another artist who addresses the problems of homeless persons, homeless people. It's an American artist, Michael Rakovich, and he started designing inflatable shelters for homeless people. And they are inflatable. You can connect them to the ventilation shafts of buildings. That will inflate them, and it will also warm the air inside. And the nice thing about it, it's also you can customize them to your own needs and wishes. So this particular shelter, inflatable shelter, Parasite, has windows, because it's also important for people, for somebody sleeping inside, to be able to look outside to see, well, maybe someone wants to hurt him, or so it has windows. I really love this one, because this was designed for a person who was a science fiction or is a science fiction fan, and he wanted his shelter to look like Jabba the Hutt, a famous character from the Star Wars trilogy. And he made his own shelter like Jabba the Hutt. And it shows that a homeless person can have agency about his shelter, and that's quite important, because they don't have much choices. To give them a sort of a sense of agency is quite important for their self-esteem. And well, the Parasite comes also with a manual, so it's open source. You can download this manual, and then you can build your own shelter. This manual shows you how to do it. And then I move on to another project by an American artist called Sarah Ross, and she made different types of archi-suits, so to say, which allows homeless people to rest on public benches anyway. Shaped or with the inspiration of tracksuit, there are different shapes attached in foam to the suit that makes you comfortable on a bench which is not meant to be comfortable. And this is a problem also. Well, this is really a comment on public space as a place for consumption. It's a bench that you can only use when you pay for it. So it's really commenting on public space becoming more and more accessible only if you consume, if you pay, if you buy a drink on a terrace, or if you have money to spend. And well, this is clearly an ironic comment on that. And last but not least, this is a project by Nadia Kabi-Linke, a German artist from Berlin, for the Triennale in Bruges in 2021. And she made this loop for shaped public bench, and it's retrofitted with anti-bird spikes. And it's clearly a comment on how public benches in public space are nowadays. Also, the shape is a comment because it refers to a private club located near this square, which is only accessible for members. And the analogy between hostile architecture for birds, so to say, anti-bird spikes, and hostile architecture for people is quite striking in this piece of art. And then I come to the notion of urban hospitality for the other than human. Since this year, I had a studio in Delft at a technical university in the bachelor, the Nature Inclusive Design Studio. So this is another subject which is really quite dear to me. And I started thinking about the notion of extending urban hospitality towards the other than human. And this is important because we need more urban biodiversity. The worldwide loss of natural ecosystems, declining biodiversity, it is vital to green cities and their public spaces in such a way that urban diversity is enhanced. And well, the case from the human point of view is it's not just for the other than human, but also for the human. For the human point of view, it's important. Because, well, more green public spaces enhances physical and mental well-being for urbanites. It mitigates the effects of climate change, rising seawater levels, excess rainfall, heat stress, etc. And it enhances urban biodiversity. So I want to take a look at two cases, one in Rotterdam and one in Amsterdam. And I'll start with the case in Rotterdam. I was not involved in this project, but it's very it's a very interesting project by the Urbanisten and DS Landscape Architects, and it's the transformation of a former railway line into a raised public park. As you could think about it as the High Line of New York. This has been done before in New York with the High Line, and also in Paris, the Promenade Plantée. And it's part of one of the 7 city projects which Rotterdam is going to execute to green the city, to render the city more hospitable towards nature, and to benefit not just the other than human, but also the humans, the human city dwellers. This is an overview of the whole project. It's about 2 kilometers long. And well, it's not just, they're not just going to green this elevated high line, this elevated railway, but they're also going to connect it to the existing green structure right next to it, which is a former canal. And this is important because animals need to be able, if you create pockets, isolated pockets, it's not going to help much for urban biodiversity. So you need to make networks. You need to connect a space like this to a larger urban ecological main structure, so that animals can move around freely and well, also to thrive, because otherwise, if they're isolated, it's not working. And here you see the scheme of the different animals that are facilitated within this project, but also humans are facilitated with hospitable conditions. For the humans, it's important to have social interaction. It will that will improve their mental and their physical health. The space, the High Line, it's a raised space, so it should be accessible also for elderly people, for instance. So it will be fitted with staircases, but also with elevators. And it should be safe, of course. And then we come to the other than human conditions. There are similarities, for instance, safety and accessibility, but animals need food and water, and they need to be able to reproduce themselves. They need to be able to find a mate to have offspring, so to say, to have sex, so to say. So reproduction, conditions for reproduction are important. Accessibility, of course, is important. And variation is important. Variation in conditions. And, well, for instance, when you think about it, birds are, of course, birds. It's easy. It's relatively easy to design an urban environment for birds, but when you think about, for instance, hedgehogs, it becomes more difficult. But they found a solution to that, and because the staircases that lead to the raised park are equipped also with a staircase for the hedgehog and other animals, an animal passage, so to say. So the hedgehog is an animal which lives during the night, and it covers it can cover up to 5 kilometers within the city. So it can move around to find, well, to find food and meet other hedgehogs. So its habitat is extended by installing these stairs, special stairs for hedgehogs and other animals. And here you see the scheme for the plan of the Hofboog Park. It's quite narrow. It's only 8 meters wide, but they managed to design tracks for different users. The green track for insects and, well, plants that will attract insects. A watery track for water animals, then the dark green track for hedgehogs and other animals, and the yellow track for humans. And, well, you can interact. You might be able to see, to have a close encounter with an other than human at the Hofboog Park, for instance, a hedgehog. Then I move on to the next project, which is called Rooted Urbanism, which I was part of. Rooted Urbanism we consider rooted urbanism as a rooted, bottom-up, holistic approach for urban development from a socio-ecological perspective. We try to look, when it comes to urban development, we think it's important to look what is already there, human and other than human. And we did a case study in Amsterdam in a neighborhood called Holendrecht. And we is Team We, an all-female design team, design and research team, starting from left, Lotte de Haan, who is a social designer, then Hedwig Giemstra, a spatial designer, Nadia Pepels, an architect, Edith Winkler, also an architect, and me, architect and researcher. And before we started, I stumbled upon this manifest by Brian Eno in collaboration with Dan Hill. Dan Hill is an architect and designer who's heading the School of Architecture in, I don't remember which city in Australia, but at the time he was working in Sweden. And he teamed up with Brian Eno to write this manifest, Design Principles for the Street. And Brian Eno, in case you don't know him, is a musician and an artist, a British musician and artist well, he played in Roxy Music, quite a famous band, but has moved on to, well, being a forefighter for a better world. And these design principles were quite, well, I was really triggered by it, and so were my teammates. And we adopted the first principle as the motto for rooted urbanism. Think like a gardener, not an architect. Design beginnings, not endings. And now we go to the case of Holendrecht, which is a social housing district planned in the 80s, and an extension in the periphery of Rotterdam, because, just as now at that point in time, we were in a housing crisis. And it was created from tabula rasa, so to say. There was a polder there, you could think, okay, there was nothing there. There was a polder there, and it was covered with a layer of sand of 1 meter in order to build this neighborhood. And the principle of the neighborhood are meandering blocks which divide on the blue hand side, where the number 1 is the main entrance, and you can park your car. It's accessible by car, for instance, and are also the entrances to the dwellings. And on the left hand side, where the green 2 is a green central space, and it's only accessible for pedestrians and bicycles, and nature, and humans and other than humans. This is an image of Holendrecht now, because 50 years have passed, and it has moved from tabula rasa to tabula scripta, because it has evolved in quite a nice green neighborhood with mature trees, and quite a mature ecosystem also. But it has also evolved into a rather bad neighborhood with a bad reputation, because it is social housing, and there are quite a lot of social problems there with gangster culture, etc., etc. So our aim was, how can we go about in this neighborhood with an approach that addresses these social problems, but also respects what is already there in terms of green habitat. And we started off with field research with Lotte de Haan. She's a social designer. And she designed a conversations piece, so to say, a social design installation which invites people to look at their neighborhood from the other than human perspective. It invites you to go down on your knees and take a look at the neighborhood, for instance, from the perspective of a dog. And the nice thing about this is the title says Bekijk je Rijk, and translated it means look at your kingdom, at your green kingdom, so to say. It invites people and makes people aware of their green neighborhood. But it's also a conversation starter to break the ice. People, when you do research in neighborhoods like this, people are often reluctant to talk to you because they're suspicious. They ask Lotte, who are you? Are you from the municipality? No, she said. Are you from the housing corporation? No, I'm not. No, also, I'm not from the housing corporation. Then it's okay. Then I will talk to you, because a lot of people in this neighborhood have something to lose and are also suspicious. They have been promised things that have not, promises that have been broken. And the nice thing about this piece is you lure them into a conversation, and when they trust you, they start to tell other things. They start to share their problems with you, etc. Well, one of the results. This is one of the results of the design studio, or the tools of the design studio, is a soft map. Because Nadia Pepels, who is really a pro at this, has made a large drawing, in which she incorporated all the stories of humans, and also the routines and rhythms of the other than humans, by day and by night. And it's an opportunity, because it's translated, it's projected also on the plan of the neighborhood. It's an opportunity to spot conflicts, but also opportunities. And this is a detail, for instance, this is a story of an elderly woman that Lotte spoke to, and she has been living in Holendrecht all her life. And it says she walks her dog every day. It keeps her active. And she will never leave here again. She lives at the second floor, but is scared to move to a ground floor, which maybe would be better for her to access a ground floor, because these apartment blocks don't have elevators. But she's afraid people will come inside, she says. Well, this is, for instance, one of those stories that was incorporated in the soft map. And this is an other than human story, so to say, of the Holendrecht hedgehog. When we first went to the neighborhood, we encountered this hedgehog, and it was in autumn, and he was obviously looking for shelter to go and hibernate. And this story was incorporated in the soft map with more information about hedgehogs, what they eat, what their routine is, and what they need. They need shelter for hibernation. They like hedges and heaps of old leaves to go into hibernation too. So we came up with the idea to apply a network of interventions for humans within the public spaces of this neighborhood. And this is an image made by Hedwig Hooghiemstra, which well, it's not a design. It's not. It's not. This is not how it is going to be. It's not a render of a architectural pavilion. It's more like an. This is how it could be. It's an urban living room for elderly residents where people can meet, for instance. And this is an image that relays the more the atmosphere of a urban hangout for local youth, because there's not much to do for them. They're hanging out at the parking places, and well, they cause nuisance there. And the idea is, if you give them their own space, their own hangout, and maybe they will stick to this space and make it their own. They have their own space, and they will cause less problems within the neighborhood as a whole. And then we thought about interventions for the other than human. And it's important when you do that it's not just isolated, but also connected to the main ecological infrastructure of the city, to be for the animals to be able to move if food runs out, or to meet other of their species to mate. And this is a reference of a Dutch artist called Herman de Vries, which is called an eco sanctuary, which we proposed because it's like an inverted hortus conclusus. It allows wild nature to thrive inside because humans cannot get to it, and man-made cultivated nature remains on the outside. And if you think about the concept of the hortus conclusus, which evolved in the Middle Ages, it was the other way around. Wild nature was dangerous and was kept outside. And within the hortus conclusus, nature was cultivated, was very orderly cultivated to serve the human needs. And this is the eco sanctuary is fitted with peeping holes, so to say, so that humans can peep inside and take a look at wild nature inside, but they cannot enter. So nature can thrive inside because it's left undisturbed. Well, all this combined, these different networks, the result is a multi-species shared space, and especially the central space of this neighborhood, we think could look like this, as a multi-species shared space where both human pavement and lighting for humans that is necessary to have a safe and nice space for humans is combined also with spaces for the non-human green spaces. Well, and then I come to the conclusion and maybe even more important, recommendations. And well, to come back to hostel architecture, I've said it already. If cities want to be more inclusive, they should abandon hostel architecture as a policy, because that's still what happens. Cities apply hostel architecture within their public spaces to avoid trouble. It simply doesn't work. And it causes, even worse, it causes waterbed effects. Because if a homeless person encounters a bench which is made impossible to rest on, he will simply go to another. He will go and search and find another space to rest. So it doesn't work. Moreover, it also undermines the sense of welcome in public spaces for all. So it should be abandoned, and I completely agree with that. And then to come back to the second part of my lecture, how to go about when designing nature-inclusive public spaces. Go for a bottom-up approach. Go into the fields, do research to map what is already there, both human and other than human, and go at different times of the day, during the day, but also during the night, and in different seasons. Winter is, of course, very different from spring or summer, but still it's useful to also go in winter. Then, second, try to connect the local residents with their natural surroundings, with, well, maybe, for instance, meeting spaces where they can meet their fellow residents, but also well, take in nature, their green neighborhood. And this is important to nurture ownership of their neighborhood and build an empathic relation with nature. And keep in mind, third, keep in mind the conditions for the other than human, that the other than human needs to thrive, which is food and water, safety, reproduction possibilities, possibilities to meet other animals to mate, accessibility, and variation in conditions. If one spot or if one plant is completely eaten up, there needs to be another plant or insect that they can also eat, to put it very well in short. And then at last, think of public spaces as multi-species shared spaces, and create a spatial network for the other than human, which is connected to the main ecological infrastructure. And I would like to end with this quote because I just think it's beautiful. And yeah, I was trained as an architect, but I really think we should maybe well, release control. As an architect, a lot of architects are control freaks, so to say. And I think we should be more loose and we should trust, for instance, also users of our designs more to be able to adapt the designs to their own needs. And so I would like to end with this quote. And well, you can follow me on Instagram, or you can go directly to the website of the blog, of the Public Space Detective blog. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Floor. I was following all your examples with real interest because as you probably know, we are implementing a neighborhood garden in Bologna, very close to our headquarters, the Public Space Museum, and we are facing some of the challenges that you mentioned during your lecture, especially the one related to benches. We are also a bit fighting with the local residents regarding the opportunity to have benches in the garden, because some people are actually against the idea of having a furniture that could invite unwanted people and unwanted behaviors. So I think there is also a change into the mentality in regard of how to use and public space and how to come together, you know, in the public domain.
Yes, you should try and convince them, because maybe this problem is not going to occur at all. I mean, it's typical. It's paranoid, and you should try and convince them and to see. And if what if this problem occurs? Then you should, at that point, see what you can try and do about it, and maybe first go and talk to the people who use the benches in an unwanted way before making it impossible to use them. I would say not less benches, but more benches in public.
Well, I totally agree with you, and I like this idea to design for humans and other than humans. And in fact, our garden is supposed to become, but it's very difficult, a biodiversity garden, also because we need to reconsider the role of nature in the urban context, and also to give some nature opportunities, especially in neighborhoods where we have mostly, surfaces covered with asphalt and a lot of cars, parked during the day and during the night. So it is, even the environment, I would say, is hostile, not just the architecture per se. But,
not just the amenities. Yeah. But even if you consider this green space in Holendrecht was maintained quite well. The municipality has a mowing scheme and it mows 20. They mow 20 times a year, which they should not do that, because they should mow less, because then there is possibility for herbs and flowers and wildflowers and more insects to grow. So it's also a matter of beheer, maintenance. And we should, if possible, we should leave the notion of a green lawn as being nature. It's not nature. It's when you look at it from an ecological point of view, it's a desert. It's a green desert. So
yes.
This is also important to have changes in maintenance policies of municipalities.
Yes, I agree. Now, I would like to invite Egle to come on stage with us, so that Egle can moderate the Q&A session. I see one question already.
Yes. First of all, I would like to share that today we had over 35 public space lovers joining us live and on different platforms. And we have a question from the audience, from CJ Oppenhauser.
Yeah, I can see it, yeah.
So he's asking, now that public furniture designs to accommodate those with mobility limitations, like picnic tables built to be accessed via wheelchair, are widely available, do you think the exclusion of those might be considered hostile?
Just to see if I understand well, the exclusion of those furniture designs, I think you mean, right?
I think he means that.
Yes. Well, in the Western world, where we have ample opportunities and also budget to equip public spaces, obviously there's more than the public bench, and it's maybe better to devote creative designers to devote their talents to design those kind of amenities instead of hostile architecture designs. So yes, I think, and there are a lot of designs. There are designers who work on solutions like he is mentioning, but I don't see them around yet a lot. But yes, I definitely think those should be there too. Yeah.
Yes, and going back to the example I was mentioning before, I think sometimes I have this feeling that people do not like the idea to see public space happening, in front of their windows. Now, especially after the pandemic, I think people like the idea to be in a quiet environment and without any kind of possible action happening unpredictable in public space. So I think the pandemic changed the way we appreciate the concept of shared space and public engagement.
Yes, well, my view of public space in the pandemic was twofold. On the one hand, a better appreciation of public space, and it's we all use public space, and we dwell in dwellings, and we all use public space. Everybody does. So the importance of public space to as a complement to our dwellings was quite obvious. And on the other hand, hostels, public space was also experienced as dangerous, of course, because you could get infected. And this is, quite paradoxal. I think we're back at business as usual. In the pandemic, we thought, we saw the benefits of public spaces and of green public spaces. But I have the feeling that, after 2 years, we are sort of back at business as usual, and it's about the money it takes to maintain green public spaces, etc. So I have mixed feelings about this. But that's why it's good that you founded the Public Space Academy. The more attention for public space, the better. And this is also something, of course, I try to do with the We Love Public Space Festival and my blog.
Yes, tell us more about this festival, because I know that you have been working on the festival for quite some time now.
Yes, it was founded. We founded it in 2017, and in Corona we could not stage it. We thought about staging it online, but then this was so contradictory to the essence of public space, is that you meet people in person. So we decided not to do that. So we had 4 editions, and each edition had a different theme. The first edition was about ownership and appropriation. How can you make residents feel more responsible for their public space, so to say, their immediate public spaces, and how can you nurture ownership and empathy for this space. We had an edition about the smart city, for instance, and we had a special edition devoted to artists who work in public space. And I think that's quite important, because as a designer or an architect or a landscape architect, you work for a client. But artists are free to intervene in public space at their own will. They don't need to brief, or they are not accountable for what they do. They are free to intervene at their own will in public spaces. And that's why I also showed some examples of activist artists, because they are free to act in a free way. They are often very precise in pointing pushing their finger on the right spot. This is what's wrong. This is what it's all about.
Yeah, very interesting. And so you were mentioning that there is a possibility to have another edition of the We Love Public Space Festival, or maybe we come all together with the Public Space Academy to Rotterdam to visit you, and we have a special edition of the Academy.
The Public Space Academy on tour. Well, you're welcome. Rotterdam is welcome. Well, I would be welcoming you, but certainly Rotterdam. Well, Rotterdam is, I think, an interesting place to stage a festival like we did, and also to host an edition of the Public Space Academy workshop, because it's well, not all people are familiar, but Rotterdam is quite special in the sense that it was bombed during the war. The inner city was bombed, and the decision was made to rebuild the city center, not the way it was, like Dresden. Dresden was rebuilt with the same street pattern and with a lot of historical details. But Rotterdam was really rebuilt, modeled to the ideal of the American city. So a division of functions: you should work and shop in the center, you should live in the suburbs, and this is all connected by car. Thus, Rotterdam has become quite a car-centered city. So in terms of public spaces, you could say that to make Rotterdam more welcoming for people, it needs quite an operation, and that's why I think Rotterdam is interesting with its ambitions towards, for instance, to green the city, because this serves more purposes. It serves the people, but it also serves the ambitions to become a nature inclusive and resilient city. And as a result of this reconstruction, Rotterdam has quite a lot of stone and asphalt. So that's also why we need more green spaces within the city.
Yes. Egle, I think there are some other comments and questions, probably. I see them in the chat.
Yes, we have 2 more questions. So we have this LinkedIn user, unfortunately I cannot see his name or her name, is asking, in the case of hostile architecture, could intermediate solutions be considered?
Yeah, what is intermediate?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the situation is either black or white, and you're either pregnant or you're not. But yeah, this is exactly what I meant to say when something is maybe hospitable to some, but hostile to others. And of course, armrests on public benches are important for elderly, but why do you have to place it with an intermediate space of 1.20 meters?
Yeah.
So yeah. I think you should take both users into mind. And as I said before, it doesn't help. It does not refrain homeless people from resting in public. It does not solve the problem. So it's like one of the authors says, there are callous objects, cruel objects, maybe I agree. They should be forbidden.
Yeah. Yeah, probably because hostile architecture is just used to hide the real problems under the carpet.
Yeah,
issues with management and policies.
Yes, it accommodates those people well, who are already fortunate, who have money, who have a home, who have a warm bed, and it disfavors people who are maybe even more reliable, who have to rely even more on public space to survive. Yeah.
Yes, and there was an article some time ago on the New York Times regarding hostile architecture and how public spaces in New York were actually changing because of this approach.
Oh, really? You should link me the mail. I think I've missed that. I've missed that.
No, it's exactly what you said, you know, it is serving certain communities that
Yes.
would like to have an environment which is fully under control without any possible situations of, unrelated or unwanted conditions or situations for public space to
An
happen.
architecture of control.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from Carina Puente Franzen. She would like to include the question of privately owned public space into the hostility context. Is it really a public space, and are they hostile by nature?
Obviously not. No, because it's privately owned. So it's not. It's interesting because in English you don't have this distinction, but in Dutch you have the distinction between you can say openbare ruimte, which is real public space open to everybody, and you have publieke ruimte, public space, which is also which is more controlled, which is it also includes, for instance, libraries, halls of stations, etc. And you have this distinction in Dutch, which you don't have in English. But a privately owned public space is obviously not as public as a real public space. And well, for instance, surveillance cameras. Owners of public spaces, of POPs, we call it POPs, privately owned public spaces. Are much more monitored by surveillance cameras, for instance. They still need permits to do it because it affects privacy issues. But already that it reduces the sense of welcome. And what is problematic about privately owned public spaces, they look public, but they are not. So the general public does not see the difference.
Exactly. Yes, I totally agree. And I see many of them in the US, of course. But I think there are some examples recently also taking place in Europe or in Italy, I would say, as well. And people do not understand the difference unless they are stopped and prevented doing something, or they are moved out from the space, and so then they understand that some rules apply. Yes. And
well, in general, of course, there are in each city you have rules, of course, to apply. You have the unwritten rules of public space, which are more universal, you could say. But in each city, there's also there are local rules. And for instance, since a few years in Rotterdam, it's forbidden to sleep in public space. You can get a fine, and this was not the case before. So this is this is not a good development.
Well, and now that you are talking about sleeping in public space, I had a conversation recently with an artist based in UK who actually made a performance in London sleeping in public space, and he was approached by the police, and the police moved him out from the space, and then his question was, why? Is there something wrong that I'm doing? I'm just laying down, and he was carrying a pillow, so it was clear that he was there to sleep, right?
Yeah.
But apparently, if you stand in a vertical position in public space, you are allowed. If you are laying down in a horizontal position, you are kicked out.
There's a thin line between lounging and loitering, so to say. This is the title, the working title of one of my. I want to write about this. There's a thin line between lounging and loitering.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think we do not have other questions other than comments of appreciation for you, Floor. I see the one from Sebnem in the chat.
Yes, she agrees that we all need inclusive cities and better, well-designed, well-tailored public spaces for all, including non-humans.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can close.
Spread the word. Spread the word, yeah.
Yes, no, it is very important that we have these conversations on public space. And so I would like to thank you again, Floor, for your time and for being with us today. I think we can close this lecture, which was quite long, almost 1 hour and a half.
Sorry, I got carried away.
Yes, so...
But long, but not tedious, I hope.
No, absolutely. And so we had people also attending and writing comments. So I think this is a very good discussion that we need to have more for the sake of public space, but also because through public space we can enable many different conditions related to humans and non-humans, as you said.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say that we will meet in Rotterdam soon. In person or in Bologna. Yes, we have 2 events happening in Bologna this year, the Past, Present and Future of Public Space Academic Conference, end of June. And in September, we are organizing an international parklet symposium in cooperation with the American architects and urban planners and practitioners. We have this US-Italy exchange because next month we will be in New York for the Public Space Challenges Symposium. And all these events are promoted as part of the celebration of the 10-year anniversary of City Space Architecture. So I'm glad that through the Public Space Academy, we have this opportunity to talk about the public space, as we did during the pandemic with our initiative, 2020, a year without public space. Now more than ever, we need to talk about public space and to practice public space. This is the next challenge.
Yeah.
As you explained, it's no longer or not just about the theory, it is about action. And so we try to push for action through the Public Space Academy.
Rather than words.
Exactly. So your lecture today was exactly hitting that. And so I'm glad that you were, part of these conversations.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Floor. And thank you, Egle. And thank you all for being with us today. We will announce soon the 4th keynote lecture of the Public Space Academy that will take place very, very soon. So follow our LinkedIn page of the Public Space Academy and social media of City Space Architecture. Hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.